Today, I want to talk about a couple of things, kind of focusing around the fact that I feel the U.S. empire is in decline, or at the very least is at threat of being in decline. And the main reason why, I think, is because of our government's foreign policies, or domestic policies as well, for that matter. But what I want to do is I want to take a look at something that Breaking Point's put out, where they covered the Chinese military parade that they held there recently, and they compare and contrast it to the U.S. military parade that we had a couple of months ago. And I thought the video was more interesting just because of some of the other things that they talk about around the parade. The parade themselves, I don't think is particularly interesting, but I think they make a few good points about the U.S. at a broader level that I think should be talked about, and I want to bring awareness to. So without further ado, we'll get into the video, and then I can bring up the points that I want to talk about.
Turning now to Beijing, where we brought everybody the news of the Shanghai Cooperation, the SCO meeting, where Modi and Putin and Xi were together. It was a major moment for the rise of multipolarity. But now we have to focus in specifically.
And just for a little bit of background context on that, so what basically happened was there was a meeting, and essentially Russia, China, India, and North Korea all got together and had a meeting between all the leaders. And I think the reason why that's important is that essentially it's all of the countries that we have kind of deemed, except for India, of course, but we have deemed our enemies, or at least our government has, our military has. These are the ones that we, are in an active, military situation with Russia through our proxy, or using Ukraine as a proxy. There's constantly a standoff with China where we're, basically over Taiwan, and there's always stuff going on with that. And then North Korea, all the threats of them having a nuke and being able to launch it at us and whatever. So these are the countries that we have basically vilified, rightly or not, from the U.S.'s point of perspective. And so now what we're seeing is finally, even though those countries plus India, they've kind of been at war with each other, or not at war, but they haven't been on the friendliest terms. Well, now they're saying, well, we all hate America so much, thanks government officials, we all hate America so much that now we're going to form a bond. It's going to basically, it's that joke of, nothing brings someone together more than a mutual hatred of someone. Well, that's exactly what's happening. And now all these countries that, although may not have been the largest or, had the most GDP or whatever, well, now they can all band together, and then they're going to be a much larger force than the United States. And so that's just kind of the framing and why I thought this segment was so important. But again, I'll let them continue on, and then I can continue making points. But that's just to kind of set the stage for why this is important that these countries met, and again, setting the groundwork for some of the points that I will make later.
On China, which had a stunning display of military might in the capital, and with Xi Jinping and millions of Chinese soldiers, service members, all gathered in, immaculate uniforms, a production for the ages, which a single message to Washington: do not mess with us. We are one of you now. You have to deal with it. So we have some video that we can show all of you. I mean, one of the most,
And the thing that he's saying there that I think has been established before, but I think he is correct in pointing out that it is these countries making a direct statement to the U.S. But I never really, and I'm not really militarily minded, so I could be completely out of the loop on this. But to me, I never thought that they were completely beneath us, right? I think if you look at the population alone of Beijing and India, I mean, yes, we might have some superior technology, some stuff that we haven't let out of the bag that we have hidden away, Black Ops, whatever, but just the amount of population of these places, and Russia as well. That's how they traditionally always would win wars, is they would just throw bodies into the grinder, and you would have to beat out their population. And even if you're killing them 2-1, well, their populations were just so much larger that was pretty much infeasible, right? There is no actual world where you're going to defeat more Russians before you run out of people to throw into the meat grinder, as it were, of war. And so that's why I think 100% it is not good that we are allowing these countries to come together and form a coalition, is because literally 2 of those 4 countries are the biggest population centers in the entire world. They have literally the largest populations. And so, when you add them together, it's like, I think they're like 2/3 of the entire world population. Like, is not a good idea for us to basically allow these countries to unite, because it doesn't matter how technologically advanced. I mean, I guess at a certain level, right, if they were so far behind. But that's the big issue, is no matter how far technologically advanced, well, 300,000 people are not going to beat 4 billion. So that's just where again, just the math is not mathing out there. And that's where, having them all unite is, I think, a very precarious situation that we find ourselves in.
Stunning things, actually, was Kim Jong-un. I believe this is one of the first ever international meetings he's ever even taken part of. Vladimir Putin was right there next to him in basically, as I talked about, the rejoining of those 2 countries in the post-Ukraine environment. But you can just see the pomp, the circumstance, the pageantry, the actually being able to march in formation, all of their uniforms that were put together. I mean, there's only one audience in the world for all of this. It's Washington, and they're actually, this is the scary part, because what do we see here? We have ICBMs and other missiles capable of hitting anywhere on the globe, 30 to 60 minutes. They had a stunning display, really, of a lot of their new military technology. By the way, they don't have supply chain problems. They don't have Lockheed Martin stocks and other things that they have to deal with. They have got one singular goal, which is, America, you will not mess with us. If we want to take over Taiwan, we'll damn well do it. If we want to continue to fund Russia.
And that is, I think, the bigger issue. I've always watched, and I never know, because I constantly see videos from both sides where one of them is saying, oh yeah, no way, with the U.S.'s naval might and the amount of ships they have and the superiority of the technology, we could literally choke off China, and then, if it actually came to war, and Taiwan is so easily defensible that, or at risk, right? So if China were to strike them, well, that would risk essentially destroying the plants the manufacturing plants that they're going in there to try, basically the entire interest that China has in Taiwan in the first place. But then I've seen, there's other arguments of, oh no, actually their military is, huge and strong, and oh, by the way, here in the U.S., it's incredibly possible that this defense budget is just overblown, and it's actually a very corrupt system where we're overpaying for missiles and ammunition or whatever it is that we're creating. So I've seen both of these arguments, and I'm not really sure what to make of either of them. I think if I had to put myself in a camp, I think it's our real strategic edge, if you will, is that we have hidden technology that we have not surfaced. I mean, we're essentially we have been using the same technology essentially for forever. So how do you not think that we have other things that are sitting in a back office, in a bunker somewhere, that far outpaces all the stuff that is being built and displayed currently in China? And so that's where I would put my money. So if I had to say one of them had an advantage, it would be us. But again, at a certain point, when you have so many countries coming together with such huge populations, well, now you're going to have to, the amount of bodies that you're going to have in an exchange. Like, your technology has to be that much better. And that's the thing, is I just don't know that we're there because their populations are so much larger.
Russia, we will. And by the way, that's why we're starting a new pipeline. It's not an accident that Russia and North Korea were standing there side by side. And if anything, I think that that picture with Modi, with Putin at the SCO, and now with North Korea and Kim Jong-un standing by that side is a perfect symbol of the failure of U.S. diplomacy. Because at every single instance, this was avoidable. We had the Putin summit. We could end the war in Ukraine if you really wanted to. You could, absolutely. We could restore decent relations with Russia and find some sort of agreement, rapprochement or whatever with Ukraine. With North Korea, Trump met with North Korea. He met with Kim Jong-un. He shook his hand. All sort of this developed. But the one thing is, in both times, he refused to drop the neocon line. With North Korea, he's like, but you got to give up your nukes. And they're like, no, it will never happen. It will quite literally never happen. So drop it.
Nor should they.
By the way, they would be
look at our foreign policy.
Idiots to do so.
Yeah.
So they're like, no, it's not happening. With Putin, they're like, oh, you have to. Yeah, I don't even know what the demand here is of Putin, right? It's like, oh, we're going to meet with you, but we're still going to fund Ukraine. He's like, okay, well, I've got millions of troops and China's got here, they have my back. India's going to keep buying my oil, so I'm just going to keep rolling, all right? And in the meantime, you guys can figure out whatever it is that you want, and I'm just going to continue inch by inch. I don't care how many soldiers of mine die in Ukraine. In the end, I'm probably going to win. And so that's their strategy. And then same with China. Like, it's not just tariffs. I support tariffs on China.
And that's exactly the thing that I think is the most interesting about that and the thing that I want to drive home is that all of this is completely self-inflicted by the United States. Like, the fact that we're going into, again, pseudo-friendly relationships with North Korea, and then I think the administration changes over to Biden, and then we're essentially, it seems like all progress towards friendliness stopped there. And again, to Sagar's point, it may have also been during Trump. I didn't really follow it that closely at the time, but he may have been demanding that they give up their nukes. And absolutely, if I were in their shoes, I would not give up the nukes either. Because if we've shown time and time again, I mean, look at Ukraine now, right? Ukraine had nukes. We made them give them up. And now they're being invaded by Russia, and they basically can't do anything to stop them. Like, that's what happens, is it completely removes your mutually assured destruction, where you go, okay, well, I'm going to launch a nuke into Moscow. If Ukraine was able to say that and actually actuate it, well, then guess what? The war never starts. And that's the thing, is when you give up your weapons like that, well, then you're just rife to have some larger superpower come in and basically overthrow you. And so that's why, yeah, they shouldn't give it up. But then also, to the point that he's saying about Putin, yeah, it doesn't even make sense what we're doing with him. Like, we've spent the last, basically since the Cold War, villainizing Russia. I mean, just think during Trump's first term, when the Russia ends up being a hoax, right? And that all these things, it's like Russia is constantly the heel, and China to a lesser extent. But I think because we get so much stuff, cheap trash from them, so we mostly villainize Russia as like the main heel for the United States. Well then, yeah, of course, how is he going to respond? Like, how is he supposed to respond to that? Like, yes, Trump likes him, but like all during his first term, all during Biden's, the whole thing, all the way back, Hillary Clinton constantly calling out like Russian collusion. Like, they're just basically the enemy that they can trick old boomers into, oh yeah, Russia is bad. Okay, like, yeah, is it the greatest place ever? No, but this is literally a problem of our own making, where we're villainizing these places, and then we try and put such punitive measures in place so as to basically turn them against us. And then what do? They say, okay, well, who else is, in the same boat as us? and then they all come together here.
Again, though, the level of capriciousness has made it so that Xi has, in the last decade, been able to fully go in on the Made in China 2025 plan. I mean, by the way, a lot of that weaponry was distinctively part of it. If you went and read all of the primary source documents that they released 10 years ago, you see there the ability to compel Modi, Putin, North Korea. You can make fun of these states if you want to. A lot of them are not like economic powerhouses, but what we have learned in the post-Ukraine environment is that production, the native capacity to produce, is the single most important thing for a nation in a time of crisis. China has been able to marry economic production, economic growth.
And that's a really good point, because all you have to do is think to essentially COVID, right? At the beginning of it, when we were like running low on hand sanitizer, running low on masks, running low on other PPE, running low on, right? There are all these things where, oh wait, we don't actually make it here. So then what are we doing? It just exposed it. And then you would hope and think that these companies or the public or someone would go, oh, this is not great that we don't make any of this stuff here that is essential. And so maybe we should bring at least a proportion of that back in-house. And then, oh no, just kidding. We're going to continue. It's literally status quo. We're going to keep doing it the way we always have, because, you can't upset globalization. We need to keep outsourcing, basically having slave labor in these other countries so that we can have the highest shareholder equity possible. Like, at what point in time what would it take for the country to finally realize, like, oh, this is not great that we don't make anything here? Like, you thought it would have been COVID because that exposed it gigantically, in my opinion. But no, again, just right back to status quo after it has subsided. Nothing has changed. Everything is still made somewhere else. And, if shit hits the fan, we're completely screwed. And, like, I don't know how someone hasn't figured this out and made it somehow mandatory that, no, we bring at least some subset of this back in-house. But that just seems to be too much to ask.
State-managed capitalism at the highest, most efficient order, and they have now the ability to bring all of these former U.S. allies and/or U.S. states which were able to engage with the United States, go in with China and say, hey, they're going to be a better partner to me. So combined with their deterrence, their weaponry, just the sheer might of their economy, of their defense.
And that's the other thing too is, obviously China is China. Like, we understand they're basically just trying to vie as the superpower in the world, right? So that's how they fit into it. But then, as I said, we shot ourselves in the foot with North Korea and Russia. North Korea, I don't think is as big of an issue. Yes, they have a nuke, but how long has the ruling party in North Korea basically like starving their citizens, creating famine to go after the nuke? So yeah, I don't think they're quite as strong, right? But yeah, then also India, which I haven't touched on yet, which basically, if you have not been following it, which I would not blame you for because it's kind of been a footnote to everything else that's been going on recently, but essentially India, we are putting higher and higher tariffs on them because they keep buying oil from Russia, which we're saying is basically supplying Russia with funding to fuel the war against Ukraine. And so then we are basically, and oh, by the way, allowing India to refine that oil and then sell it to the US. So we're actually buying oil from Russia anyway because they're buying it so cheap. India's buying it so cheap from Russia, and then they're reselling it globally. So then, yeah, it's just, the whole thing is insane and ridiculous, and it's just mind-boggling how we allow this stuff to happen. But yes, with India, we're now stepping up tariffs on them, and then they're getting to the point where, exactly as Sagar is saying, they're saying, screw you, we're going to go and we're going to now get into the fold with China, which is, again, those two countries alone, India and China, teaming up together against us, more or less, awful. Like, very, very bad. I think that is the most dangerous situation that we can come across, because that was part of it too, was as labor was getting more expensive in China, well, then some of it was being exported to India, some of it was Indonesia, some of it is Mexico, like, and if we cut off India from that equation, not great. But more concerning is that now there is a possible brewing of an alliance because of how we've treated all of these countries.
Sector. Anybody in Washington who's dealing with the bullshit that we are today should be deeply afraid. And this is scary because as someone who's been covering this for literally a decade, I remember reading those 2025 plans. I was like, it's never going to happen. Or, at the very least, Washington's going to wake up. The pivot to Asia is finally happening. We're here now. We are here now. And we lost. We have to admit it. Can we even catch up? Maybe. That's a big question mark. So it's stunning. It really is.
Yeah.
That parade.
I think that military parade is an intentional global wake-up call, or wake-up call at least here at home, that we already live in a different world than most Americans imagine that we live in.
That's right.
And I was taking a look at this Foreign Policy magazine article. The headline is, China's military is now leading. Wednesday's parade proved the regional military balance has irrevocably changed. And I just want to read you a little bit of this just to underscore what I'm saying.
And just at the highest level, that I think that's completely doomer mentality. I don't think that's actually what it is. Yes, I hope it is a wake-up call to, Washington, D.C., more so because all of those leaders are there together, and that is the most concerning part of it. But the actual parade itself, I just it's like, whatever, that is less concerning to me than the leaders being together, because anyone, if they really wanted to put on, a parade, like, how many people actually are involved in this? How many munitions were actually rolled out? Like, okay, yes, there's some of it where, yes, they were very well organized and this, that, and the other, but like, it's nothing that is concerning to me. Again, the bigger concern for me is that the powers that are coalescing and coming together and basically teaming up against the United States. That is way more concerning to me than the actual parade.
Saying here, it's now widely accepted that the story Western countries once told themselves about China's technological development, it's a mere imitator of Western tech, it steals IP, its successes result from wasteful public subsidies, is inadequate. I would say that's putting it kindly. This story still has some elements of truth, but is much less true than it used to be. China is today an innovator and a technological leader in robotics, electric vehicles, nuclear reactors, solar energy, drones, where they make 70 to 90% of drones made in China, by the way, guys, high-speed rail, and AI. If confirmation were needed, the September 3rd military parade through...
And again, I think these claims as well are overblown. We still have all of the top platforms for AI. Basically all the things they listed on there. Like, I think EVs is the one, I've covered it before, but EVs is the one where, yes, okay, they might have an edge on that. Solar, yes, they manufacture pretty much all of the solar panels. So there are some components of that are true. But yeah, I do think it is a concern, though, because I think they are gaining the advantage. And that's part of it too, is that they send people here to learn, or they, do espionage or whatever the route is that they're doing, or, companies basically, even if you're looking at electric cars, like, oh, we have to have a Chinese company that essentially works with you. Okay, well, they're stealing how to create the car, and then they're going to improve upon it. And that's the thing is, another thing that I think is really important to call out is that in the U.S., we just kind of rest on our laurels because infrastructure and R&D and all these things are hard, right? Those are hard things to do. They're expensive. And for worse, not even for better, just for worse, no companies, no one in the U.S., they're just trying to maximize profits. So what is the incentive when you're trying to maximize profits? Well, you find out what is good enough, and then you just charge the maximum amount that you can for it. There's no innovation to continue to try and create better products. It's literally just what is the bare minimum we can get away with, and then how much money can we make off of that, and then just continue that on for as long as you can. So that's where you're seeing just the worst situations where, yes, they're creeping up on us, and then like we're not trying to drive for new and better things. Like, no, that's how we're getting caught. Is that, and the other part of that too is with the financialization of everything. Well, then on top of that, all those smartest people are all just working on how to extract more money out of people. They're not, the best and the brightest aren't being put to work on how do we create, the next level of, in this instance, military equipment, or how do we come up with better surgery techniques, or how do we cure cancer, or how do we do all these things, right? We're not working towards that. We're just working on how do we extract money out of people. And that's exactly what the US has become, because it is late stage, quote unquote, capitalism. But I don't think it's even that. It's like literally corporatism. And so, yeah, this is why I think it's so concerning, is because the direction that we're going is we're allowing everyone to catch up to us and even surpass us in some situations. And that's why originally I was even arguing for tariffs. I think how we've handled it has been just awful. There's no rhyme or reason to it. But that's why I said we need tariffs, is because if we want to protect our industries, or you just force them to all die out and get beaten out by Chinese companies. And then new startups have to come along, and then, okay, then we can outcompete again. But that's the problem, is if you don't have these mindsets of constantly coming up with better and better and better things, well, then you're going to get beat by other countries that are hungrier than you.
Beijing confirms that we must add military tech to this list. It's no longer enough to say that China's military is catching up or that it is copying foreign military equipment designs. China is now innovating, and it is leading. In the process, the regional military balance.
No, I don't think it's leading, for exactly what I was saying before, where I think our military tech, we have backroom stuff that hasn't been exposed, and it's way bigger and badder than I think any of us actually realize. And that's why China hasn't already went in and taken Taiwan, or and any other number of things. But I think there's an understanding in that. And so again, this article that she's quoting, I think is completely overblown in doomerism, but it is making a good point, like I said before, where I think the other countries are catching us, especially in other areas, consumer goods and that kind of stuff. And that becomes a concern, because then globally, I mean, again, just look at the Chinese market, the Indian market, the Russia market, like those three, who are we selling to at a certain point in time? Our goods, right? They don't want to take in our goods. And so that's the problem, is that, okay, well then, and also, by the way, because it's an inferior product. And so when you leave it up to any country and their consumers, what basically is going to happen is they're going to look at the product, and they're not going to care about the U.S. product, because the other, the Chinese cars or whatever are going to be better and cheaper. And so what are you going to do at that point in time? The only way the system that we have works, as it's currently set up, is if we have such a significant better product than any other country in the world that everyone else wants to buy what we are selling. And that is no longer the case, in my opinion. And that's where it's very concerning that, okay, then what are we going to do? What are we exporting? Literally, it's just selling to ourselves, and then we're making no money. And that part of it is very concerning, because then, again, being left to the globalization, the thing that's going to win out is the cheapest, best product, and we do not create that here.
that has for decades favored the U.S. and its partners is being irrevocably changed. Now, one thing that they, of course, don't have that we do is we have these military bases spread all over the world. They do not have that. So that is a very different kind of an orientation towards the globe. But in terms of military tech, I've been listening to Seth Harper. We had on this show to talk about the Fort Bragg cartel, the book that he just wrote. He, studies and follows and researches and does, all kinds of incredible journalism around the state of the U.S. military. And he says we're fooling ourselves if we think that we just reign supreme and it's unquestioned. When's the last time we won a war? Like, look at how we did how did it go with us and the Houthis?
Yes.
Right? How did it go with us in Afghanistan? How is it going with all of our weapons and know-how and yes, special operations, special operators on the ground in Ukraine? How is that going? Right? Even in Gaza, where it's our tax dollars funding this horrific.
The Gaza one is whatever. And this is my argument against that. I agree with all of that though, right? I think if you're looking at the standard weapons that we're shipping out and that kind of stuff, I think that point, right, is good in that, yeah, all of the incursions where, we're going in and like the Houthis, like all these are, yes, essentially mission accomplished, but yeah, it doesn't go particularly well. It's not impressive. It's not completely flattening your competition and in a spectacular show of force. Like, it's kind of middling, right? I think that's the concern of it. But then again, the argument that kind of goes hand in hand is, well, when has it been such an existential issue that we needed to bring out whatever big guns we have hidden away, right? I think that's something to kind of think about is like, okay, but when has our hand actually been forced? I don't think it has. And so that's where, yeah, again, I'm of both minds. Yes, I agree with what is being said right there, where it's like, okay, yeah, it hasn't gone particularly well for us recently in any of these conflicts. But then again, so what? Like, when have we needed to pull out the big guns? We haven't. So I'm not that concerned about it.
Genocide. It's our weaponry. How is that? Hamas is still able to operate and able to, to take out IDF soldiers at times. So we're sort of living in a...
That one is very complicated at that point because Benjamin Netanyahu wants to stand up Hamas anyway, and then, they don't want to really actually wipe them out, and then because, they want to have someone to, like the saying where he says, oh yeah, I control how high the flame is. Yeah, he just wants to have someone that basically justifies him going into Gaza and completely bombing it all the time. So that one is very complex, right? They don't want to send in their military for essentially hand-to-hand combat in Gaza. They just want to indiscriminately bomb and take out as many people as possible while claiming, oh, we're targeting Hamas, but not really, right? So yeah, that one is more complex. But yeah, I guess if you're trying to make that argument, I understand where you could make it, but I don't think that one is definitely the weakest of all because literally they're just bombing. So like what other tech are they using of ours?
Delusion about our unquestioned military superiority. And I think, for anyone who's paying attention, this parade is one symbol that should help to pop that bubble.
Absolutely. I think I said this it's the analogy. I was having dinner with somebody and who was very knowledgeable about U.S. defense. And the analogy is that the United States in the lead up to World War II, our technological advantage was simple: production. More than anything. So the B-17, the B-29, they were not the world's...
Which is especially funny because what we're literally talking about earlier in this, the U.S. does not have production anymore. We don't produce anything here. And that is the problem. So yeah, that was our competitive advantage, completely gone. I mean, in the military case, I guess, right? But yeah, it's not, everything else is made elsewhere. And so, yeah, being able to spin up a wartime economy, who even knows if that would be possible anymore?
Greatest aircraft, but we could just make a shitload of them. The Nazis invented the V-2 rocket. They invented the first jet engine, the first jet aircraft that the United States actually had to engage with above the skies of Germany. Guess what? We still won, even with the technically less superior aircraft. Why? Because you could produce a ton. There's great stories. The Japanese Zero was one of the most sophisticated airplanes of its time. But, the production, after it was eventually bombed away, the Japanese would have to use a horse-drawn cart to bring a newly finished piece of material to another. Now we are the Japanese and the Germans. We have this stunning B-2. It costs $2 billion, but we don't have the oil to put in it. We don't have the production facility or others to create the ammunition that goes into the basic gun. Now, what China has been able to do is not only match U.S. stunning technology, they have the entire supply chain to deal with it if they need to. They have the economic might and all the ability to sustain all of that. Meanwhile, we're living in a service-based, financialized, ridiculous system where I was just telling you today, FanDuel is now going to fund public transportation so that fans can get to an Eagles game in Philly.
And his point is very good. And that's what I've been making this entire time. And that's the thing that I think is the most important, why I wanted to cover this, is that, it's just the financialization of the United States. Everything is financialized. Everything, it's just service-based, and it's just insane. And it's not a healthy model for a country. And I think that is killing us as well, along with our policies, right, that we have towards the rest of the globe, is that, again, all of our best and brightest are going into, finance, and what are we doing? That doesn't push forward the country at all. That doesn't help set us aside and above the other competitors, if you will, right? And to his point, making the same point that I had about the infrastructure and the, building and research and development. Yeah, literally a betting company is doing public transportation to the Eagles game. If that isn't a glaring red flag of everything that is wrong with, we don't want to invest in infrastructure. We don't want to, there's all these things that we don't want to invest in because it's not, you're not seeing a financial, immediate and overwhelming financial return. And so again, it is, that's what I've always had an issue with the US, is that it's literally just how can we extract the largest amount of return with the least amount of work. And if you don't put in the work, you're going to get beat.
Philadelphia. The government can't fund it because FanDuel is stepping in.
Well,
that's the reality.
Our military parade was funded by what? Palantir and Coinbase. Yeah. I mean, it's
we
sick.
have
it's actually
some
sick.
of that. Let's put that B2, please, up on the screen. This is a symbol of our, we can't march.
Compare and contrast.
It's all, look at this.
Just compare and contrast.
Look, I do not want to be in a position where I'm putting down our service members, and they probably didn't have a lot of time to prepare for this because it was shoddily and hastily put together. The individual people in there, I have nothing but deep love and respect for. What I have concern about is what? Is the system that places them in potentially harm's way and has failed them, and at the same time is raping the American taxpayer who has to...
Yeah, side by side, it doesn't look particularly good, but I think the argument there that, the U.S. parade was truly just thrown together and not, you would think that they would put something on a little bit more impressive, but again, I don't really care all that much. I'm more concerned with what do we have, in the basement hidden away. I think that is a little bit more interesting. And then the other thing too that I think people discount and I think is actually really important is that there are more guns in the United States than there are people. And so any shot at a land invasion, we're going to be okay. No one is going to come in and try and take over the United States because, oh, hey, guess what? You're literally going to have to go door to door and it's going to be a gunfight every single inch of the way across the United States. So, what am I actually concerned about, right? I think it's just that as the United States, things are just going to get worse and worse and worse for the average citizen as we get basically edged out by China and other countries that have had enough of us and team up and say we no longer need you. How long is us being at the top of the Western civilization how far does that influence go, right? How long does that keep us afloat, where we put pressure on other countries to put huge tariffs on Chinese cars, right? EVs. Like, how long can this realistically last? And that's where I get concerned, is because I think our policies have sped up that timeline. And I think we get to a world where nothing that we export is novel or impressive or world leading in a very short amount of time.
Spend $1 trillion a year for this nonsense. Take a look at their GDP per spending per capita on military and then compare it to ours. That's the most important thing. The other thing that we all need to grapple with is that Xi and Putin, they are megalomaniac, crazy, but smart. And that, we have megalomaniac crazy, but not smart.
The other thing to think about too, that I think is vastly underplayed, is that with all of Hollywood essentially going woke, if you will, we no longer create, and I think this is a much bigger problem than people want to admit it, but we're no longer exporting our movies or music or any of that kind of stuff. I think music to a lesser degree, but like, think about movies. Like, what is the last good movie that has come out? And as we keep getting worse and worse and worse with like these awful movies with hokey plot lines that just are reboots, and there's nothing new coming out of that industry and being exported globally, I think it makes it much easier for countries to essentially turn on us. Like, when we are the ones creating entertainment for the world, there is a lot of goodwill that goes into being that country. And again, I think as we're creating worse and worse products with people who all buy into a certain ideology, and you get away from good storytelling that captivated the world, well, guess what? I think that also, again, is insanely undervalued. I think that was a huge thing that made the average citizen, again, on the global stage, it's not going to be the leader, it's not going to sway their minds, but like the average citizen in these countries now have so much less exposure to the United States because we're literally putting out garbage. And I think that is, again, something that can't be underrated. And I think people don't really think about that now, but is something that in the future we will be able to look back at and say, this actually had a much bigger effect than we thought it did at the time.
And just to show you all, this particular clip is Xi and Putin chatting about how anyone could live to 150 with organ I mean, these guys are obsessed with transhumanism and with living forever in the exact same way, but they may actually be able to do it. Let's take a listen.
In the past, people rarely lived longer than 70 years, but today, they say that at 70, you are still a child.
Human organs can be continuously transplanted. The longer you live, the younger you become, and can even achieve immortality.
So you can even achieve immortality.
And here's the thing about this one. Yes, they said it. Yes, I think there should be some volition paid to that. But like, again, who knows? It might be them just BSing each other. It's so hard to tell right now, right? Because I think we're just coming into now the area where it might be possible to start doing stuff like this, right? Certainly extending the life, but how long are they actually going to be able to do it? This, that, and the other, right? I think there are, if Biden is what happened to, Biden in the last 4 years and his decline, if, you're seeing all these people that are still continuing to age, well, then I don't think that, immortality has been completely solved yet, right? Because I think the people who are very powerful and whatever, they would have access to it first. And as you're seeing people still pass away and age out and this kind of stuff, when you see Nancy Pelosi or Donald Trump or whoever suddenly look 20 years younger, okay, well then now there's something to be concerned about. But like, again, I just kind of look at this of like, okay, it's a bunch of old guys BSing, who are afraid of their own mortality and they don't want to lose power, and like, okay, so what? Like, big deal. Again, this is just more people freaking out about nothing. It's kind of interesting that they're saying it, but, in 20 years, if, none of these guys look any older, okay, then I might be concerned. But until that happens, okay.
The longer you live, the younger you become.
I mean, and I've talked about this with Putin. He's a czar. He's the new Song emperor. Like, these guys are not communist or, they're like, oh, he's the new Soviet Union. Well, guys, read a book. Like, you have to go way, way deeper. And if you look at the way that they talk about the Chinese elites in particular, they look at themselves as the inheritors of a 2,500-year-old culture. They're not looking at themselves as history began with Mao Zedong. That's part of it, but it is part of a much, much broader picture. And so, in a way, it's like the old world is punching back. And here in the U.S., like, we're just...
This is what Yegor says to me. He's like, maybe the aberration was like, U.S. Western dominance in the world, that the historical tradition is actually China being the leader of the world.
Yeah,
so that's an interesting point, but I think the thing is that I think it's the corruption of the United States and the fact that we have allowed ourselves to be corrupted, right? I think that's what the bigger issue is that if everything continued as it was intended when the United States was founded, I think we still continue on the same trajectory that we had coming up in the world, and I think basically the U.S. runs away globally, right, with everything. We just continue creating the best stuff, but again, it's corruption and it's greed and it's all these things that have led to us backsliding or stagnating, or that's literally just what it is in the U.S. And quite frankly, it's very worrying. And yeah, it's we'll see what happens, but I think we need a big wake-up call to snap us out of it real quick, or we do risk being completely run over by all these other countries. And quite honestly, I do not have the most faith in that, in us getting some sort of wake-up call, because I think just people are way too greedy to actually do that, to make the investments that need to be made, to bring things back in-house. Again, we just want to financialize and service everything, and that's where we are, sadly.
Even asked me that. We did a podcast. He's like, "Will the American empire fall?" And I was like, "Well, statistically, yeah." Like, it's like,
it's like asking, "Are we going to one day die?" It's like,
I said there's a Fight Club quote. On a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everything drops to zero.
Exactly.
So if you look at the exactly. The aberration in China was that during the 1900s it was weak and it was divided. A lot of it kind of was. It depends. It's complicated, but the point, just broadly, is that where they see their, historical, where they see themselves today, is on a long timeline that we can barely conceive of in their culture and in their history. And so this will be the single most important battle for the 21st century. It might be a hot battle. It might be economic. Who knows? But it is the story of our time. You really cannot grapple with it unless you are all the people alive who really had to deal with psychologically the rise of either Nazi Germany or the Kaiser Imperial Germany. That's what it was like to live through. When you were the British Empire and the sun never set upon you, and then all of a sudden you have this, state Germany, this new state, and they're ramping up industrial production and science, and it caused all kinds of destabilization, and nobody really knew what to deal with. And it ended in the First World War. It was a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe. And I don't have any faith that our statesmen today are smarter and able to deal with this crisis. And the people back then were I've read a lot of their primary documents, correspondence. They were a hell of a lot smarter. And
yeah, that's a really funny point, because yes, like if you actually go back and read some of the things, like I saw one where it was like something from even just the 1950s, and it was a whole long, using words that you can't even imagine Donald Trump knows, because they've just dumbed down the rhetoric, dumber and dumber and dumber. And it was written for the average American. So, at a certain level, yeah, I think there's been a lot of dumbing down, and I think that becomes an issue. And then to the other point that he had of the timeline, right, and how they view things, it's not just that Xi is in power for however long, or Putin, or Kim Jong Il, or all these people, or Kim Jong Un, like all these people that are in office essentially for life, right? So yes, they have a much longer view, and they're building towards something on a longer timeline, and they have a vision, and it's not just that, but it's that. And I think that's the problem of the parties being so polarized and so political, and pushing their narratives, and it being so far apart, is that then it's just a wild. I mean, just look at immigration, right? Where it's such a wild, sling from everyone's allowed in. There's over 10 million people that come in during the 4 years, to now no one is coming in at all, right? And again, that's just one example, but the policies are so different that you literally get whiplash going from one person to the next every 4 to 8 years. And that's the thing, is like, how can you have a coherent long thing that you're building towards, right? A long-term vision, if you're literally just every 4 years or every 8 years, you're basically undoing everything. You spend the first whatever allotment of time undoing everything that the person before you did, and then by that time, probably the House or the Senate or whatever has flipped to the other party, and then you can't actually get anything done because it's a stalemate, and nothing can really happen. And that's the thing about having those parties so divided, because if you just had it where every single person was able to say, okay, these are the things I believe in, and you just laid out your arguments, well, then you could move basically things through legislature, you could make bills, or you could pass amendments or whatever. You could do that so much easier than how you have it today. And really the only time that things have been able to get done is, Donald Trump now having House, Senate, and the presidency, but then, oh, hey, by the way, he's not even doing it the right way. And so, yeah, it's just at a certain point in time, you have to look at it and say, like, are things actually working out? I don't have a better system. I don't think any of the other systems are better, but I think the thing that has been ruining the American model has been that, again, the polarization between the two parties. And so no one wants to work together on anything anymore. And that's what I think the biggest problem is, and that's what I think is so sad, is that, yeah, then you can't have everyone moving in the same direction, and nothing's going to get done, and that's just creating more stagnation, in my opinion.
Thinking deeply, and they still weren't able to avoid, some sort of horrific.
Trump is just in it for himself. Like, he only cares about what he can squeeze out of the state.
Because it's not Trump, it's Biden. But it's the system.
Sure, but it also in this moment, like, Trump has accelerated.
Yeah, I agree.
This is the Trump effect. Like, he has accelerated the coming together of these world leaders, and you even had some, attempted rapprochement between South Korea and North Korea in the context.
And that's exactly what I was saying before, where I think the policies that we have been putting into place has accelerated, all these countries coming together, especially India, right? Because that's just recently with the tariffs. But yeah, prior to, right, with Biden, I think the relations with Russia and China got much better with the whole Ukraine thing because of, kicked off during Biden. Same thing with North Korea and Russia. I think their relationship has gotten better because they were helping supply the initial, whether it was troops, I think he sent over some troops, or whether it was munitions or drones or whatever it was. He sent some of those, North Korea sent some of that equipment and personnel up to Russia to help them, especially in the earlier stages where it wasn't looking particularly good. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. That point of, especially recently, but just our actions throughout have accelerated the rate at which this should ever have happened. And I don't think it should have happened in the first place. But yeah, it's it's definitely throwing gasoline on the fire.
Of this. And I think it's also important to remind, because we talked about this earlier in the week, the purpose of this parade in part is to recast the narrative of World War II and the post-World War II order, and to put China at the center of that, and China as a leader and the true sort of heir to the post-World War II order. So it's, narratively and propaganda, from a propaganda perspective, it's interesting as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is fascinating to see them try to reclaim the World War II. I mean, look, I do get it in a certain way. I think, 20 million Chinese died in the Second World War fighting the Japanese. It wasn't all the Chinese communists. A lot of the Chinese nationalists are the ones who died in that as well. So, it was a little complicated. Sometimes they were pretty happy to let the nationalists get killed by the Japanese if it meant it was good for them. It's an interesting story. A lot of people should actually spend more time thinking and reading about it. But the point more broadly is that they love to flip the terms on the United States and be like, oh, a U.S.-led world order? What has that led to? Chaos, Iraq, And they love to talk about zero-sum competition or mutual respect.
And that's exactly it as well. And again, another reason why I wanted to cover it is because, what we have done, just constant wars in the Middle East. And that's the thing is, when you have the military-industrial complex and you're literally just war and endless wars, well, then the whole world is going to end up hating you. And I think that's the through line of all of it. And the base of it is that we're just constantly warmongering everywhere and sticking our noses in places where it doesn't belong and backing up countries who are committing genocides and doing regime change over and over. And all the other countries just look at it and go who is this helping? Literally just people who create military weaponry. That is it. And again, it's become so perverse. And, they have their claws so deep in the system that literally the only thing that's bipartisan is, going into military action in different places. And so, of course, other countries are going to look at that and be like, well, we're fed up with the United States now because they're the warmongers and they're the ones going out and basically upsetting other areas that they don't belong and, trying to overthrow people and doing all these actions that are destabilizing different areas around the world. And so, we don't want them. And at the first chance that we get, well, hey, guess what? Now we're all going to group up and say, to hell with the United States.
Respect in their minds means Taiwan is ours and you can fuck off. Or, how Russia decides to elect its country is its own business. If Kim Jong-un has to create a famine to create ICBMs, so be it. And, in the 90s, it would be very easy to say, well, that's not who we are. Well, you can't say that in the year 2025, not in the midst of Gaza, Ukraine, Libya, Syria, Iraq.
How are we going to...
Yeah, and we've completely lost the moral high ground on this thing. And that's where... if you've seen in the past where it's like, oh yeah, China is the one brokering peace talks, not the U.S. Yeah, for good reason, because we don't want to. Think about right when the Ukraine and Russia thing started kicking off. We literally all flew to Ukraine, we and Europe all flew to Ukraine and we're like, no, don't settle with him. We're going to fight back. We're going to do this thing. We're going to send you funding. We basically told Ukraine, don't come to any sort of agreement, peace agreement. And then now guess what happened? Now it's a prolonged war with no end in sight. And now the U.S. is saying we're going to send more munitions and more weapons and all this kind of stuff. And that's exactly it. Is like, how can we be taken seriously when we go to other places and say, hey, you need to behave in a way that is, polite and respectful and courteous to the rest of the world. And then, oh, by the way, we're just, we're warmongering at every turn. It's laughable. Like, no one's going to take you seriously on the global stage.
Stand on some territorial integrity principle when we're funding a
100%.
genocide in Gaza. We'd be insane to go to war with China over Taiwan.
Our Secretary of State is on his way over to Israel, apparently, or I guess I should say whatever, what they claim to be Israel. Apparently, he's going to participate in a stellar event.
Great.
Yeah, exactly. The Secretary of State of the United States of America. So really, we're going to fund Ukraine to protect their territorial integrity? Okay. It's like, oh, and we have a problem with monarch, or we have a problem with dictators? Really? That's not who we buy our oil from, is it? Oh, wait. So it all falls apart on a very basic scrutiny.
Yeah, this is why I can't stand people who are in, claim to be full on for either side and not essentially independent. There are so many morally hypocritical takes that you have to have, and even on the slightest digging into anything, right? I mean, that was a perfect example of like, oh yeah, by the way, we're essentially moving, forcing everyone out of Gaza. That's the goal, right? Oh, but by the way, we're also, we're crying foul at Ukraine's border integrity, right? It's just so hypocritical. Every single thing that you do when you're standing up for these things. That's why, again, I just can't take people seriously who put themselves in one party or the other, is because you provide no amount of critical thought to any of these points, and you don't apply your own moral compass onto the events that are occurring. Because if you did, you would say, oh no, like we're doing the exact same thing. I can't stand up for that. I can't put up with it. And so, yeah, you're just completely morally bankrupt. You're completely hypocritical. Like, yeah, and it's not even thinly veiled. It's literally just you're going along with the BS that you're being fed, and it's just so disappointing, and it's disgusting. And again, I don't know how any of the countries have put up with this and us for as long as they have.
Let's go ahead and get then to Trump, which we've been building up here, who is, he kind of admitted the quiet part out loud. He's like, they were doing it because they wanted me to watch, and I was watching. Let's take a listen.
I put out a truth last night. You saw that. And I was the one that brought it up. I said, they're only doing this. They're looking to, when they did what they did, I thought it was a beautiful ceremony. I thought it was very, very impressive. But I understood the reason they were doing it, and they were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. My relationship with all of them is very good. We're going to find out how good it is over the next week or two.
They were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. He told them in a truth that he was like, they all conspire against the United States. Well, what are you going to do about it? And not just...
Yeah, what are you going to do about it? And then the other thing, too, is... like, so what? Like, it's basically, it's tariffs in reverse. It's them saying, now you come to the table and you deal with us, not the other way around. And that's exactly what it is. And the other thing too to think about is, like, think about our allies and what turmoil they're in now, right? I don't know if you've been following it all, but like in England, in all these countries in Europe, they're essentially importing a massive amount of Middle Easterners and, people who follow Islam and Muslim and, all these different, Middle Eastern groups. They're essentially just importing mass amounts of them, and it's causing upheaval in their native populations. And just, it's all, again, all of our allies are becoming weaker, and all of the groups that are teamed up here are becoming stronger. And so it's just not a good place for us to be in.
Wave, wave around and tell Putin big things are coming. Like what? Like what exactly? What do you have left? What cards do you have left to play? You want to know China's cards? Let's go and show everybody. Let's put this up there on the screen. All the military all the military equipment that they were debuted, it's stunning. Hypersonic missiles, combat vehicles, unmanned aircraft, undersea drones, nuclear missiles capable of hitting anywhere on the globe. I mean, this was a massive shot at the Pentagon. This is all has production lines, capacity, that does not rely on us. Does anyone want...
And just playing devil's advocate here, all you really need is one UFO, the U.S. to roll out one UFO with lasers, energy weapons, and all of this is completely worthless. So, like, yeah, okay, they're rolling all this stuff out, but, like, so what? Again, who knows? I could be completely wrong about that take, but that's kind of how I look at it. Like, when I see this kind of stuff, it's like, all right, so what?
I know who we rely on for some of our military equipment. Right, it's called China. Seems smart, really works out. And the more that you look into all of their capacity and their show, it's like you said, they not only have the ability to spend less because they don't have some great geopolitical projection. By the way, Trump yesterday was like, yeah, we'll send more troops to Poland. I was like, oh, really? Why? For what reason? Why? Why do we need troops in Poland and all over the Baltics and Germany and Korea and Japan? And I mean, I could go on forever. Some of those make sense. Japan, Korea, etc. Germany? Why? I mean, again, it's one of those where nobody asks basic questions. Keep cutting these checks to the Pentagon. And that's what it looks like when you're actually intelligent and you think deeply about.
That's the other thing too, is like building new equipment and cutting edge equipment and all that kind of stuff. That is one thing, but yeah, funding all of these bases everywhere and, keeping military personnel deployed there and that is just such a, this is probably a very unpopular take, but I completely equate that to welfare for people who love guns. Like, it's literally, okay, you go over to this other place, you can hang out there, you can RP military personnel, and then you can come back here and just basically we're burning, setting money into a pit and setting it on fire. And it's literally just a money laundering scheme to essentially Lockheed Martin and, all of these military, all the military industrial complex companies. Just, again, it's literally just setting money on fire. It's not an efficient use of money at all.
What this is all going to look like and potentially should look like in the future should anything happen. The last thing we wanted to mention was about Korea, because this was actually very interesting. Let's go and put this last part up on the screen. Obviously, Korea, one of the top 10 trading partners of the United States, one of the most important U.S. allies in all of Southeast Asia, actually sent their speaker in parliament to shake hands with Kim Jong-un at the Beijing military parade. Now, why is that important? Well, it used to be in the first Trump administration that the United States was the one who was trying to broker some sort of peace and or, rapprochement between the South and the North. But now the Koreans who, look, not exactly in love with China, are sending delegations to the Beijing military parade. And basically a word to Washington is, you treat us like shit. They don't treat us so bad over here, even though we have all of our differences. And they're willing to shake hands with Kim Jong-un and potentially broker some sort of peace via China. Without the United States, it would be a disaster.
And that's exactly the point that I was making earlier, where, yes, we used to be viewed as the ones who would be able to broker peace talks and, but again, I think these places are not, even South Korea is not taking us seriously anymore and rightfully so, as the people who are able to, go out and broker peace and, be the shining example of here's how a country is supposed to conduct itself. I mean, it's laughable the way that we act, and again, rightfully so, that they're now China is the arbiter of, oh, hey, let's make peace here. And yeah, I think that's very concerning. And again, I don't know how we fix it, though, because, again, I think everyone is bought and paid for. The only bipartisan thing is war. And that is not good. It's very concerning.
Everybody keep their eye on this. I know it can seem tedious and more, but I mean, it really is it's like the 1930s or the early 1900s all over again. Like the entire world order is being rewritten before our eyes. Mm-hmm. It's not that hard actually to figure out. What's hard to figure out is how to avoid what usually happens when something like this does seem like it's on the horizon. The last thing I wanted to mention was this story, which again challenges dollar supremacy. Can we go ahead and put B7, please? Which is developing countries have been swapping out of dollar debt to cut their borrowing costs. They say that sovereign borrowers are now turning to lower interest rate currencies such as the Chinese renminbi and or the Swiss franc to get around the fluctuations in the interest rates of the dollar set by the Federal Reserve. So just another little thing that we can look at just broadly about all of the signs of where things are.
That is very concerning, but here's the thing about that is that it just makes sense, right? Because the thing is, if you're going over to Chinese currency or whatever, the problem with the U.S. currency is just that it's so overinflated to begin with. Like, I don't even think yes, it does have to do with interest rates, but like with that, it's like, okay, we can do so much more with Chinese currency than we can with U.S. dollar, because the other thing with it too is like China comes in and they do like Belt and Road, so like you're also buying from them. It's like a whole package thing, right? And so, being able to, okay, well, we can do so many more projects with this amount of money that we're basically borrowing from them versus dollars if we're, using U.S. companies to come in and provide, these services and help them build infrastructure and all these things. And so it's more bang for your buck as well when you're using these other countries' currencies. And so it's just, I think there's multiple reasons why it's happening, but yeah, it's the uncertainty as well, I'm sure, has a component that plays into that.
I'm not a BRICS person. I'm not saying it's all happening, tomorrow in the end of the U.S. empire. That's not how it works. The point is that sometimes it takes decades. And the initial signs, though, if you're smart enough, you can see that they start to rhyme with a lot of problems.
All right. And that'll essentially wrap up what I wanted to talk about here. But again, they were focusing on the parade at first, but I thought the conversation overall was much more interesting and is one that needs to be thought about. I think the incentive structure in the United States, are we actually going to move in that direction? Is it even possible? I think that is very concerning. I don't think it's on a very good trajectory, and I think, we're heading where we're heading. It's a mighty big ship, and it's going to be very hard to steer it in a different direction. You kind of hope that it'll happen, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But I thought it was very interesting to kind of take a look at it. Again, if you have not been following these countries coming together and basically forming a coalition, it is very troubling, again, especially with China and India starting to be on, good conditions with each other. Because, I remember even in the first Trump administration, they were, bombing each other along their shared border, but now they're coming together and meeting and, having, at the military parade, and that's very concerning to me. But if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe. That will really help my channel grow. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.